Memories of Ice Audiobook. Prologue. 1. The ancient wars of the Talan Imis and the Jaghut saw the world torn asunder. Vast armies contended on the ravaged lands, the dead piled high, their bone the bones of hills, their spilled blood the blood of seas. Sorceries raged until the sky itself was on fire. Ancient Histories, Volume. I Kinachik Karbaran. Maithki Im Pogrom of the Rotted Flower, the 33rd Jaghut war 298,665 years before burned sleep. Swallows darted through the clouds of midges dancing over the mudflats. The sky above the marsh remained grey, but it had lost its mercurial wintry gleam, and the warm wind sighing through the air above the ravaged land held the scent of healing. What had once been the inland freshwater sea the Imis called Jagratil, born from the shattering of the Jaghut ice fields, was now in its own death throes. The pallid overcast was reflected in dwindling pools and stretches of knee-deep water for as far south as the eye could scan, but nonetheless, newly birthed land dominated the vista. The breaking of the sorcery that had raised the glacial age returned to the region the old natural seasons, but the memories of mountain-high ice lingered. The exposed bedrock to the north was gouged and scraped, its basins filled with boulders. The heavy silts that had been the floor of the inland sea still bubbled with escaping gases, as the land, freed of the enormous weight with the glaciers passing 8 years past, continued its slow ascent. Jagratil's life had been short, yet the silts that had settled on its bottom were thick and treacherous. Pran Chol, bonecaster of Canigtol's clan among the Cron-Imis, sat motionless atop a mostly buried boulder along an ancient beach ridge. The descent before him was snarled in low, wiry grasses and withered driftwood. 12 paces beyond, the land dropped slightly, then stretched out into a broad basin of mud. 3 Rannig had become trapped in a boggy sinkhole 20 paces into the basin. A bull male, his mate and their calf ranged in a pathetic defensive circle. Mired and vulnerable, they must have seemed easy kills for the pack of A that found them. But the land was treacherous indeed. The large tundra wolves had succumbed to the same fate as the Rannig. Pran Chol counted 6A, including a yearling. Tracks indicated that another yearling had circled the sinkhole dozens of times before wandering westward, doomed no doubt to die in solitude. How long ago had this drama occurred? There was no way to tell. The mud had hardened on Rannig and A alike, forming cloaks of clay latticed with cracks. Spots of bright green showed where windborne seeds had germinated, and the bonecaster was reminded of his visions when spirit-walking, a host of mundane details twisted into something unreal. For the beasts, the struggle had become eternal, hunter and hunted locked together for all time. Someone padded to his side, crouched down beside him. Pran Chol's tawny eyes remained fixed on the frozen tableau. The rhythm of footsteps told the bonecaster the identity of his companion, and now came the warm-blooded smells that were as much a signature as resting eyes upon the man's face. Canigtol spoke. What lies beneath the clay, bonecaster? Single quote. Only that which has shaped the clay itself, clan leader. You see no omen in these beasts. Single quote. Pran Chol smiled. Do you? Single quote. Canigtol considered for a time, then said Rannig are gone from these lands. So to the A. We see before us an ancient battle. These statements have depth, for they stir my soul. Mine as well, the bonecaster conceded. We hunted the Rannig until they were no more, and this brought starvation to the A, for we had also hunted the Tenig until they were no more as well. The Akor who walk with the Bedouin would not share with the A, and now the tundra is empty. From this I conclude that we were wasteful and thoughtless in our hunting. Yet the need to feed our own young. The need for more young was great. It remains so, clan leader. Canigtol grunted. The Jaghut were powerful in these lands, bonecaster. They did not flee, not at first. You know the cost in Imis blood. And the land yields its bounty to answer that cost. To serve our war. Thus the depths are stirred. The clan leader nodded and was silent. Pran Chol waited. In their shared words they still tracked the skin of things. Revelation of the muscle and bone was yet to come. But Canigtol was no fool, and the wait was not long. We are like those beasts. The bonecaster's eyes shifted to the south horizon, tightened. Canigtol continued, we are the clay, and our endless war against the Jaghut is the struggling beast beneath. The surface is shaped by what lies beneath. He gestured with one hand. And before us now, in these creatures slowly turning to stone, is the curse of eternity. There was still more. Pran Chol said nothing. Rannig and A. Canigtol resumed. Almost gone from the mortal realm. Hunter and hunted both. To the very bones, the bonecaster whispered. Would that you had seen an omen, the clan leader muttered, rising. Pran Chol also straightened. Would that I had, he agreed in a tone that only faintly echoed Canigtol's right, sardonic utterance. Are we close, bonecaster? Single quote. Pran Chol glanced down at his shadow, studied the antlered silhouette, the figure hinted within a furred cape, ragged hides and headdress. The sun's angle made him seem tall, almost as tall as a Jaghut. Tomorrow, he said. They are weakening. A night of travel will weaken them even more. Good. Then the clan shall camp here tonight. The bonecaster listened as Canigtol made his way back down to where the others waited. With darkness, Pran Chol would spirit walk into the whispering earth, seeking those of his own kind. While their quarry was weakening, Canigtol's clan was yet weaker. Less than a dozen adults remained. When pursuing Jaghut, the distinction of hunter and hunted had little meaning. He lifted his head and sniffed the crepuscular air. Another bonecaster wandered this land. The taint was unmistakable. He wondered who it was, wondered why it traveled alone, bereft of clan and kin. And knowing that even as he had sensed its presence, or it in turn had sensed his, he wondered why it had not yet sought him out. She pulled herself clear of the mud and dropped down onto the sandy bank, her breath coming in harsh, labored gasps. Her son and daughter squirmed free of her leaden arms, crawled further onto the island's modest hump. The Jaghut mother lowered her head until her brow rested against the cool, damp sand. Grit pressed into the skin of her forehead with raw insistence. The burns there were too recent to have healed, nor were they likely to. She was defeated, and death had only to await the arrival of her hunters. They were mercifully competent, at least. These Imis cared nothing for torture. A swift killing blow. For her, then for her children. And with them, with this meager, tattered family, the last of the Jaghut would vanish from this continent. Mercy arrived in many guises. Had they not joined in chaining Raast, they would all, Imis and Jaghut both, have found themselves kneeling before that tyrant. A temporary truce of expedience. She'd known enough to flee once the chaining was done. She'd known, even then, that the Imis clan would resume the pursuit. The mother felt no bitterness, but it made her no less desperate. Sensing a new presence on the small island, her head snapped up. Her children had frozen in place, staring up in terror at the Imis woman who now stood before them. The mother's grey eyes narrowed. Clever, bonecaster. My senses were tuned only to those behind us. Very well, be done with it. The young, black-haired woman smiled. No bargains, Jaghut. You always seek bargains to spare the lives of your children. Have you broken the kin threads with these two, then? They seem young for that. Bargains are pointless. Your kind never agrees with them. No, yet still your kind try. I shall not. Kill us, then. Swiftly. The Imis was wearing the skin of a panther. Her eyes were as black and seemed to match its shimmer in the dying light. She looked well fed, her large swollen breasts indicating she had recently birthed. The Jaghut mother could not read the woman's expression, only that it lacked the typical grim certainty she usually associated with the strange, rounded faces of the Imis. The Bonecaster spoke. I have enough Jaghut blood on my hands. I leave you to the Krong clan that will find you tomorrow. To me, the mother growled, it matters not which of you kills us, only that you kill us. The woman's broad mouth quirked. I can see your point. Weariness threatened to overwhelm the Jaghut mother, but she managed to pull herself into a sitting position. What, she asked between gasps, do you want? Single quote. To offer you a bargain. Breath-catching, the Jaghut mother stared into the Bonecaster's dark eyes and saw nothing of mockery. Her gaze then dropped for the briefest of moments on her son and daughter, then back up to hold steady on the woman's own. The Imis slowly nodded. The earth had cracked some time in the past, a wound of such depth as to birth a molten river wide enough to stretch from horizon to horizon. Vast and black, the river of stone and ash reached southwestward, down to the distant sea. Only the smallest of plants had managed to find purchase, and the Bonecaster's passage, a Jaghut child in the crook of each arm, raised sultry clouds of dust that hung motionless in her wake. She judged the boy of perhaps 5 years of age, his sister perhaps 4. Neither seemed entirely aware, and clearly neither had understood their mother when she'd hugged them goodbye. The long flight down the Lammoth and across the Jagratil had driven them both into shock. No doubt witnessing the ghastly death of their father had not helped matters. They clung to her with their small, grubby hands, grim reminders of the child she had but recently lost. Before long, both began suckling at her breasts, evincing desperate hunger. Some time later, the children slept. The lava flow thinned as she approached the coast. A range of hills rose into distant mountains on her right. A level plain stretched directly before her, ending at a ridge half a league distant. Though she could not see it, she knew that just on the other side of the ridge, the land slumped down to the sea. The plain itself was marked by regular humps, and the Bonecaster paused to study them. The mounds were arrayed in concentric circles, and at the center was a larger dome, all covered in a mantle of lava and ash. The rotted tooth of a ruined tower rose from the plain's edge, at the base of the first line of hills. Those hills, as she had noted the first time she had visited this place, were themselves far too evenly spaced to be natural. The Bonecaster lifted her head. The mingled scents were unmistakable, one ancient and dead, the other less so. The boy stirred in her clasp, but remained asleep. Ah, she murmured, you sense it as well. Skirting the plain, she walked towards the blackened tower. The Warren's gate was just beyond the ragged edifice, suspended in the air at about 6 times her height. She saw it as a red welt, a thing damaged, but no longer bleeding. She could not recognize the Warren, the old damage obscured the portal's characteristics. Unease rippled faintly through her. The Bonecaster set the children down by the tower, then sat on a block of tumbled masonry. Her gaze fell to the 2 young Jaghut, still curled in sleep, lying on their beds of ash. What choice? She whispered. It must be Ontos Felik. It certainly isn't Telen. Starbled Demelane. Unlikely. Her eyes were pulled to the plain, narrowing on the mound rings. Who dwelt here? Who else was in the habit of building in stone? She fell silent for a long moment, then swung her attention back to the ruin. This tower is the final proof, for it is naught else but Jaghut, and such a structure would not be raised this close to an inimical Warren. No, the gate is Ontos Felik. It must be so. Still, there were additional risks. An adult Jaghut in the Warren beyond, coming upon 2 children not of its own blood, might as easily kill them as adopt them. Then their death stain another's hands, a Jaghut's. Scant comfort that distinction. It matters not which of you kills us, only that you kill us. The breath hissed between the woman's teeth. What choice? She asked again. She would let them sleep a little longer. Then, she would send them through the gate. A word to the boy, take care of your sister. The journey will not be long. And to them both, your mother waits beyond. A lie, but they would need courage. If she cannot find you, then one of her kin will. Go then, to safety, to salvation. After all, what could be worse than death? She rose as they approached. Pranchol tested the air, frowned. The Jaghut had not unveiled her Warren. Even more disconcerting, where were her children? She greets us with calm, Canig Tol muttered. She does, the Bonecaster agreed. I've no trust in that, we should kill her immediately. She would speak with us, Pranchol said. A deadly risk to appease her desire. I cannot disagree, clan leader. Yet what has she done with her children? Single quote. Can you not sense them? Single quote. Pranchol shook his head. Prepare your spearmen, he said, stepping forward. There was peace in her eyes, so clear an acceptance of her own imminent death that the Bonecaster was shaken. Pranchol walked through shin-deep water, then stepped onto the island's sandy bank to stand face to face with the Jaghut. What have you done with them? He demanded. The mother smiled, lips peeling back to reveal her tusks. Gone. Where? Single quote. Beyond your reach, Bonecaster. Pranchol's frown deepened. These are our lands. There is no place here that is beyond our reach. Have you slain them with your own hands, then? Single quote. The Jaghut cocked her head, studied the Imis. I had always believed you were united in your hatred for our kind. I had always believed that such concepts as compassion and mercy were alien to your natures. The Bonecaster stared at the woman for a long moment, then his gaze dropped away past her and scanned the soft clay ground. An Imis has been here, he said. A woman. The Bonecaster, the one I could not find in my spirit walk. The one who chose not to be found. What has she done? Single quote. She has explored this land, the Jaghut replied. She has found a gate far to the south. It is Ontos Felik. I am glad, Pranchol said, I am not a mother. And you, woman, should be glad I am not cruel. He gestured. Heavy spears flashed past the Bonecaster. 6 long, fluted heads of flint punched through the skin covering the Jaghut's chest. She staggered, then folded to the ground in a clatter of shafts. Thus ended the 33rd Jaghut War. Pranchol whirled. We've no time for a pyre. We must strike southward. Quickly. Canig Tol stepped forward as his warriors went to retrieve their weapons. The clan leader's eyes narrowed on the Bonecaster. What distresses you? Single quote. A renegade Bonecaster has taken the children. South. Single quote. To mourn. The clan leader's brows knitted. The renegade would save this woman's children. The renegade believes the rent to be Ontos Felik. Pranchol watched the blood leave Canig Tol's face. Go to mourn, Bonecaster, the clan leader whispered. We are not cruel. Go now. Pranchol bowed. The Telen Warren engulfed him. The faintest release of her power sent the 2 Jaghut children upward into the gate's maw. The girl cried out a moment before reaching it, a longing wail for her mother, who she imagined waited beyond. Then the 2 small figures vanished within. The Bonecaster sighed and continued to stare upward, seeking any evidence that the passage had gone awry. It seemed, however, that no wounds had reopened, no gush of wild power bled from the portal. Did it look different? She could not be sure. This was new land for her. She had nothing of the bone-bred sensitivity that she had known all her life among the lands of the Tarat clan, in the heart of the First Empire. The Telen Warren opened behind her. The woman spun round, moments from veering into her soul-taken form. An Arctic fox bounded into view, slowed upon seeing her, then sembled back into its immense form. She saw before her a young man, wearing the skin of his totem animal across his shoulders, and a battered antler headdress. His expression was twisted with fear, his eyes not on her, but on the portal beyond. The woman smiled. I greet you, fellow bonecaster. Yes, I have sent him through. They are beyond the reach of your vengeance, and this pleases me. His tawny eyes fixed on her. Who are you? What clan? Single quote. I have left my clan, but I was once counted among the Logros. I am named Kalava. You should have let me find you last night, Cranchol said. I would then have been able to convince you that a swift death was the greater mercy for those children than what you have done here, Kalava. They are young enough to be adopted. You have come to the place called Morn, Cranchol interjected, his voice cold. To the ruins of an ancient city. Jaghut. Not Jaghut. This tower, yes, but it was built long afterward, in the time between the city's destruction and the Teal Arid, this flow of lava which buried something already dead. He raised a hand, pointed towards the suspended gate. It was this wounding, that destroyed the city, Kalava. The warren beyond, do you not understand? It is not Omto's Felik. Tell me this, how are such wounds sealed? You know the answer, Bonecaster. Single quote. The woman slowly turned, studied the rent. If a soul sealed that wound, then it should have been freed when the children arrived. Freed, Cranchol hissed. Exchange. Trembling, Kalava faced him again. Then where is it? Why has it not appeared? Single quote. Cranchol turned to study the central mound on the plain. Oh, he whispered, but it has. He glanced back at his fellow Bonecaster. Tell me, will you in turn give up your life for those children? They are trapped now in an eternal nightmare of pain. Does your compassion extend to sacrificing yourself in yet another exchange? He studied her, then sighed. I thought not, so wipe away those tears, Kalava. Hypocrisy ill suits a Bonecaster. What the woman managed after a time, what has been freed? Single quote. Cranchol shook his head. He studied the central mound again. I am not sure, but we shall have to do something about it, sooner or later. I suspect we have plenty of time. The creature must now free itself of its tomb, and that has been thoroughly warded. More, there is the Teal Arid's mantle of stone still clothing the barrow. After a moment, he added. But time we shall have. What do you mean? Single quote. The gathering has been called. The ritual of Telen awaits us, Bonecaster. She spat. You are all insane. To choose immortality for the sake of a war, madness. I shall defy the call, Bonecaster. He nodded. Yet the ritual shall be done. I have spirit walked into the future, Kalava. I have seen my withered face of 200,000 and more years hence. We shall have our eternal war. Bitterness filled Kalava's voice. My brother will be pleased. Who is your brother? Single quote. Onos Teulan, the first sword. Cranchol turned at this. You are the defier. You sorted your clan, your kin. To break the link and thus achieve freedom, yes. Alas, my eldest brother's skills more than match mine. Yet now we are both free, though what I celebrate Onos Teulan curses. She wrapped her arms around herself, and Cranchol saw upon her layers and layers of pain. Hers was a freedom he did not envy. She spoke again. This city, then. Who built it? K'chain Chemal. I know the name, but little else about them. Cranchol nodded. We shall, I expect, learn. 2. Continents of Coralry and Jacaroku, in the time of dying, 736 years before Burn's sleep, 3 years after the fall of the crippled god. The fall had shattered a continent. Forests had burned, the firestorms lighting the horizons in every direction, bathing crimson the heaving ash-filled clouds blanketing the sky. The conflagration had seemed unending, world-devouring, weeks into months, and through it all could be heard the screams of a god. Pain gave birth to rage. Rage to poison and infection, sparing no one. Scattered survivors remained, reduced to savagery, wandering a landscape pocked with huge craters now filled with murky, lifeless water, the sky churning endlessly above them. Kinship had been dismembered, love had proved a burden too costly to carry. They ate what they could off each other and scanned the ravaged world around them with rapacious intent. One figure walked this landscape alone. Wrapped in rotting rags, he was of average height, his features blunt and unprepossessing. There was a dark cast to his face, a heavy inflexibility in his eyes. He walked as if gathering suffering unto himself, unmindful of its vast weight, walked as if incapable of yielding, of denying the gifts of his own spirit. In the distance, ragged bands eyed the figure as he strode, step by step, across what was left of the continent that would one day be called Coralry. Hunger might have driven him closer, but there were no fools left among the survivors of the fall, and so they maintained a watchful distance, curiosity dulled by fear. For the man was an ancient god, and he walked among them. Beyond the suffering he absorbed, Caerol would have willingly embraced the broken souls, yet he had fed, was feeding on the blood spilled onto this land, and the truth was this, the power born of that would be needed. In Caerol's wake, men and women, killed women, killed children. Dark slaughter was the river the elder god rode. Elder gods embodied a host of harsh unpleasantries. The foreign god had been torn apart in his descent to earth. He had come down in pieces, in streaks of flame. His pain was fire, screams and thunder, a voice that had been heard by half the world. Pain and outrage. And Caerol reflected grief. It would be a long time before the foreign god could begin to reclaim the remaining fragments of its life, and so begin to unveil its nature. Caerol feared that day's arrival. From such a shattering could only come madness. The summoners were dead, destroyed by what they had called down upon them. There was no point in hating them, no need to conjure up images of what they in truth deserved by way of punishment. They had after all been desperate. Desperate enough to part the fabric of chaos, to open a way into an alien remote realm, to then lure a curious god of that realm closer, ever closer to the trap they had prepared. The summoners sought power. All to destroy one man. The elder god had crossed the ruined continent, had looked upon the still living flesh of the fallen god, had seen the unearthly maggots that crawled forth from that rotting, endlessly pulsing meat and broken bone. Had seen what those maggots flowered into. Even now, as he reached the battered shoreline of Jacaroku, the ancient sister continent to Coralry, they wheeled above him on the broad black wings. Sensing the power within him, they were hungry for its taste. But a strong god could ignore the scavengers that trailed in his wake, and Caerol was a strong god. Temples had been raised in his name. Blood had for generations soaked countless altars in worship of him. The nascent cities were wreathed in the smoke of forges' pyres, the red glow of humanity's dawn. The first empire had risen on a continent half a world away from where Caerol now walked. An empire of humans, born from the legacy of the Tlan from whom it took its name. But it had not been alone for long. Here on Jacaroku, in the shadow of long-dead K'chain Chemal ruins, another empire had emerged. Brutal, a devourer of souls, its ruler was a warrior without equal. Caerol had come to destroy him, had come to slap the chains of 12 million slaves. Even the Jaghut tyrants had not commanded such heartless mastery over their subjects. No, it took a mortal human to achieve this level of tyranny over his kin. 2 other elder gods were converging on the Calorian Empire. The decision had been made. The 3 last of the elder would bring to a close the High King's despotic rule. Caerol could sense his companions. Both were close, both had been comrades once, but they all, Carol included, had changed, had drifted far apart. This would mark the first conjoining in millennia. He could sense a fourth presence as well, a savage IENT beast following his spoor. A beast of the earth, of winter's frozen breath, a beast with white fur, bloodied, wounded almost unto death by the fall. A beast with but one surviving eye to look upon the destroyed land that had once been its home, long before the Empire's rise. Trailing, but coming no closer. And Carol well knew, it would remain a distant observer of all that was about to occur. The elder god could spare it no sorrow, yet was not indifferent to its pain. We each survive as we must, and when time comes to die, we find our places of solitude. The Calorian Empire had spread to every shoreline of Jakaraku, yet Carol saw no one as he took his first steps inland. Lifeless waste stretched on all sides. The air was grey with ash and dust, the skies overhead churning like lead in a smith's cauldron. The elder god experienced the first breath of unease, sidling chill across his soul. Above him the god-spawned scavengers cackled as they wheeled. A familiar voice spoke in Carol's mind. Brother, I am upon the north shore. And I the west. Are you troubled? I am. All is dead. Incinerated. The heat remains deep beneath the beds of ash. Ash and bone. A third voice spoke. Brothers, I am come from the south, where once dwelt the cities. All destroyed. The echoes of a continent's death cry still linger. Are we deceived? Is this illusion? Carol addressed the first elder who had spoken in his mind. Draconis, I too feel the death cry. Such pain, indeed, more dreadful in its aspect than that of the fallen one. If not a deception as our sister suggests, what has he done? Single quote. We have stepped onto this land, and so all share what you sense, Carol, Draconis replied. I too am not certain of its truth. Sister, do you approach the High King's abode? The third voice replied, I do, brother Draconis. Would you and brother Carol join me now, that we may confront this mortal as one? We shall. Warrens opened, one to the far north, the other directly before Carol. The two elder gods joined their sister upon a ragged hilltop where wind swirled through the ashes, spinning funereal wreaths skyward. Directly before them, on a heap of burnt bones, was a throne. The man seated upon it was smiling. As you can see, he rasped after a moment of scornful regard, I have prepared for your arrival. Oh yes, I knew you were coming. Draconis, of Tiam's kin. Carol, opener of the paths. His grey eyes swung to the third elder. And you. My dear, I was under the impression that you had abandoned your old self. Walking among the mortals, playing the role of middling sorceress, such a deadly risk, though perhaps this is what entices you so to the mortal game. You've stood on fields of battles, woman. One stray arrow, he slowly shook his head. We have come, Carol said, to end your reign of terror. Kala's brows rose. You would take from me all that I have worked so hard to achieve. 50 years, dear rivals, to conquer an entire continent. Oh, perhaps Arditha still held out, always late in sending me my rightful tribute, but I ignored such petty gestures. She has fled, did you know? The bitch. Do you imagine yourselves the first to challenge me? The circle brought down a foreign god. The effort went awry, thus sparing me the task of killing the fools with my own hand. And the fallen one. Well, he'll not recover for some time, and even then, do you truly imagine he will accede to anyone's bidding? I would have. Enough, Draconis growled. Your prattling grows wearisome, Kala. Very well, the High King sighed. He leaned forward. You've come to liberate my people from my tyrannical rule. Alas, I am not one to relinquish such things. Jace to you, not to anyone. He settled back, waved a languid hand. Thus, what you would refuse me, I now refuse you. Though the truth was before Carol's eyes, he could not believe it. What have? Are you blind? Kala shrieked, clutching at the arms of his throne. It is gone. They are gone. Break the chains, will you? Go ahead. No, I surrender them. Here, all about you is now free. Dust. Bones. All free. Single quote. You have in truth incinerated an entire continent. The sister elder whispered. Jakaraku is no more and never again shall be. What I have unleashed will never heal. Do you understand me? Never. And it is all your fault. Yours. Paved in bone and ash, this noble road you chose to walk. Your road. We cannot allow this. It has already happened, you foolish woman. Single quote. Carol spoke within the minds of his kin. It must be done. I will fashion a place for this. Within myself. A warrant to hold all this. Draconis asked in horror. My brother. No, it must be done. Join with me now, this shaping will not be easy. It will break you, Carol, his sister said. There must be another way. None. To leave this continent as it is, no, this world is young. To carry such a scar. What of Kala? Draconis inquired. What of this creature? We mark him, Carol replied. We know his deepest desire, do we not? And the span of his life. Long, my friends. Agreed. Carol blinked, fixed his dark, heavy eyes on the High King. For this crime, Kala, we deliver appropriate punishment. Know this, you Kala Idran Testacula shall know mortal life unending. Mortal in the ravages of age, in the pain of wounds and the anguish of despair. In dreams brought to ruin. In love withered. In the shadow of death's spectre, ever a threat to end what you will not relinquish. Draconis spoke, Kala Idran Testacula, you shall never ascend. Their sister said, Kala Idran Testacula, each time you rise, you shall then fall. All that you achieve shall turn to dust in your hands. As you have willfully done here, so it shall be in turn visited upon all that you do. Three voices curse you, Carol intoned. It is done. The man on the throne trembled. His lips drew back in a rictus snarl. I shall break you. Each of you. I swear this upon the bones of 7 million sacrifices. Carol, you shall fade from the world, you shall be forgotten. Draconis, what you create shall be turned upon you. And as for you, woman, unhuman hands shall tear your body into pieces upon a field of battle, yet you shall know no respite, thus my curse upon you, sister of cold nights. Kala Idran Testacula, one voice, has spoken 3 curses. Thus. They left Kala upon his throne, upon its heap of bones. They merged their power to draw chains around a continent of slaughter, then pulled it into a warren created for that sole purpose, leaving the land itself bared. To heal. The effort left Carol broken, bearing wounds he knew he would carry for all his existence. More, he could already feel the twilight of his worship, the blight of Kala's curse. To his surprise, the loss pained him less than he would have imagined. The 3 stood at the portal of the nascent, lifeless realm, and looked long upon their handiwork. Then Draconis spoke, since the time of all darkness, I have been forging a sword. Both Carol and the sister of cold nights turned at this, for they had known nothing of it. Draconis continued. The forging has taken a long time, but I am now nearing completion. The power invested within the sword possesses a finality. Then Carol whispered after a moment's consideration, you must make alterations in the final shaping. So it seems, I shall need to think long on this. After a long moment, Carol and his brother turned to their sister. She shrugged. I shall endeavor to guard myself. When my destruction comes, it will be through betrayal and naught else. There can be no precaution against such a thing, lest my life become its own nightmare of suspicion and mistrust. To this I shall not surrender. Until that moment I shall continue to play the mortal game. Careful, then, Carol murmured, whom you choose to fight for. Find a companion, Draconis advised. A worthy one. Wise words from you both. I thank you. There was nothing more to be said. The three had come together with an intent they had now achieved. Perhaps not in the manner they would have wished, but it was done. And the price had been paid. Willingly. 3 lives and 1 each destroyed. For the one, the beginning of eternal hatred. For the 3, a fair exchange. Elder gods, it has been said, embodied a host of unpleasantries. In the distance, the beast watched the 3 figures part ways. Riven with pain, white fur stained and dripping blood, the gouged pit of its lost eye glittering wet, it held its hulking mass on trembling legs. It longed for death, but death would not come. It longed for vengeance, but those who had wounded it were dead. There but remained the man seated on the throne, who had laid waste to the beast's home. Time enough would come for the settling of that score. A final longing filled the creature's ravaged soul. Somewhere, amidst the conflagration of the fall and the chaos that followed, it had lost its mate and was now alone. Perhaps she still lived. Perhaps she wandered, wounded as he was, searching the broken wastes for sign of him. Or perhaps she had fled, in pain and terror, to the warren that had given fire to her spirit. Wherever she had gone, assuming she still lived, he would find her. The 3 distant figures unveiled warrens, each vanishing into their elder realms. The beast elected to follow none of them. They were young entities as far as he and his mate were concerned, and the warren she might have fled to was, in comparison to those of the elder gods, ancient. The path that awaited him was perilous, and he knew fear in his laboring heart. The portal that opened before him revealed a grey street, swirling storm of power. The beast hesitated, then strode into it. And was gone. Commentary from Tor.com. Welcome to the Malazan reread of The Fallen. Every post will start off with a summary of events, followed by reaction and commentary by your hosts Bill and Amanda, with Amanda, new to the series, going first, and finally comments from Tor.com readers. In this article, we'll cover the prologue and chapter 1 of Memories of Ice by Stephen Erickson. A fair warning before we get started, we'll be discussing both novel and whole series themes, narrative arcs that run across the entire series, and foreshadowing, so while the summary of events may be free of spoilers, the commentary and reader comments most definitely will not be. To put it another way, major spoilers. Another fair warning. Grab a cup of tea before you start reading, these posts are not the shortest. Prologue. Scene 1. Set during the 33rd Jaghut War. Pran Chol, whom we saw in Silverfox's birth in Got M, is looking at a scene preserved in ice. 3 extinct Rannig trapped in a sinkhole, a male, mate and calf, along with 6 extinct huge wolves, though a young A seems to have escaped only to die, Pran thinks, in solitude. Pran Chol is joined by another Imis, Canig Tol, and the two discuss how the Imis hunted creatures to extinction, and how they can see themselves and their war with the Jaghut in the scene before them. We then learn they're tracking Jaghut and are close. Pran senses another bonecaster nearby, traveling alone. Scene 2. The Jaghut mother being pursued is exhausted and wounded and knows she and her son and daughter will be killed soon. She thinks they are the last Jaghut on this continent and recalls how she and other Jaghut allied with the Imis to chain the tyrant Rost, knowing the Imis would turn on them immediately afterward. She is surprised by the bonecaster Pran sensed, who offers the Jaghut mother a bargain, leave the mother for Pran's group, but the bonecaster will save the children. Scene 3. The bonecaster takes the boy and girl to a tower with a warren's damaged gate high up in the air. She assumes it is Onto's Felic Jaghut warren, due to its proximity to the tower, which seems Jaghut in nature. She plans to send him through to save them. Scene 4. Pran Chol's group finds the Jaghut mother without her children. She tells him the other bonecaster took her children to a gate in the south. The Imis kill her. Pran tells Canig they must head south quickly as the other bonecaster is about to send the children through the rent at morn, incorrectly believing it to be Onto's Felic. Canig tells Pran to go quickly for we are not cruel. Scene 5. The renegade bonecaster sends the children through. Pran appears and she identifies herself as Kalava of the Logros clan. Pran tells her the Jaghut tower was atop the ruins of an ancient city and it was the rent that destroyed the city. He asks Kalava how such wounds are sealed and she says if a soul had sealed it, her sending the children in would free it and put the children in its place. He challenged her to sacrifice herself to save the children, knowing she will not. Looking at a large mound on the plain, he tells her the prior soul has arrived, though it will have to free itself of the tomb and dig out from under the lava flow, meaning they have time to deal with it. He adds they'll have lots of time, as the first gathering has been called to perform the ritual of Telen. Kalava says they're all insane to make themselves immortal to fight a war and declares she will defy the call. He tells her he has spirit walk far into the future and has seen his Talan Imis self. She says her brother will be pleased, knows Tulan, the first sword. At his name, Pran identifies just who she is the one who sorted her clan and kin save for Tul. She says she did it to break the link and thus achieve freedom. She asks Pran who built the ancient city and he answers Kachain Chemal. When Kalava says she knows almost nothing of them, Pran says he's pretty sure they'll learn. Scene 6. Set 3 years after the fall of the crippled god on the Coralry and Jakaroku continents. The fall had destroyed an entire continent with firestorms for months, the fallen god screaming in pain the whole time, the pain eventually turning to rage then poison. Carol walks the continent among the few survivors, feeding on the blood from the fall and from the killings in his wake, thinking this power will be needed. Scene 7. The crippled god had broken into pieces. Carol had seen some of the pieces and the maggots crawling from them and then turning into great ravens. He thinks it will be long before the crippled god could reclaim the fragments and show its true nature and Carol worries it will be insane from the shattering. The summoners of the god had opened a portal through chaos to an alien world and pulled the god down for power to try and destroy Kala. Carol had come here to destroy Kala who had ruled with such heartless mastery, worse even than a Jaghut tyrant. He was to be joined by 2 other elder gods whom he now senses nearing. He senses as well a one-eyed beast following, wounded by the fall. A beast that has roamed this land long before Kala's empire rose. As Carol walks across Jakaroku, he sees no life, just ash. The other 2 gods, Draconis and Sister of Cold Night, approaching from other directions, tell him they are finding the same. The 3 meet Kala, sitting on his throne atop a hill of bones. They tell him they came to end his reign of terror, and he tells them he conquered the continent in only 50 years, save for Ardatha who has fled. He then says they will not be able to liberate his people as he has killed them all, incinerating the entire continent. Carol tells the others he will fashion a place for this. Within myself, another warren, the Imperial Warren. Draconis and Sister are appalled at the cost to Carol. The 3 curse Kala took no mortal life unending. Mortal in the ravages of age, in the pain of wounds. Dreams brought to ruin. In love withered. You shall never ascend. Each time you rise, you shall then fall. All that you achieve shall turn to dust in your hands. In turn, Kala, using the power of all the death he caused, curses them. Carol, you shall fade from the world and be forgotten. Draconis, what you create shall be turned upon you. And as for you, woman, unhuman hands shall tear your body into pieces upon a field of battle, yet you shall know no respite. Scene 8. They create the warren to hold the destruction so the land might heal. Caerul is nearly broken by it, wounded for all time, and he can already feel his worship dwindling. Draconis mentions he has been forging a sword since the time of all darkness, a sword that possesses a finality. Caerul suggests he change the sword before finishing it, and Draconis agrees. Sister says she won't live her life worrying about the curse and her destruction will come from betrayal. The others advise she be careful whom she chooses to fight for and also finds herself a companion. Scene 9. The one-eyed beast, identified as more ancient than the elder gods, watches the elder gods depart. It has lost its mate and will seek it. It heads into its own warren. Amanda's reaction to the prologue. Okay, anyone else foreseeing wrist strain from this one? *Heftstome***. Since this novel is called Memories of Ice, and we all now associate ice with the Jaghut, I sense we will be delving much more into the history of their war. The extract at the start of the prologue also emphasizes this as it tells about the titanic struggle between the two races. Sorceries raged until the sky itself was fire. 298,665 years before Burns' sleep, way to remind us instantly about the tremendous scope of this series. I am still sometimes totally overwhelmed by the idea of how much world building went into the Malazan Book of the Fallen. One thing I love about Erikson's writing is that you can feel instantly that you are reading one of his novels. After 2 books, the style is enormously recognizable and we can see themes that flow from book to book. Such as the first sentence here, swallows darted through the clouds of midges dancing over the mudflats. Insects. Straight away. Is it just me that reads about that inland sea and wonders about the name of the sea that became Riraku? The word born from the shattering of the Jaghut ice fields conveys such earth-shattering pain and destruction. Pran Chol, if I hadn't read Bill's synopsis of the prologue I wouldn't have remembered this chap. I dread to think how bad I'll be when reaching the final novel and trying to dredge up details. Once again we are given a nice example of how Erikson builds a world and its creatures without unnecessary explanation. Here Pran observes the Rannig and the A, and we're given enough detail to realize they can be equated to elk and wolves, for instance. Again an emphasis on age and ancient battles with the Rannig and A tableau. We see before us an ancient battle. These statements have depth, for they stir my soul. It is interesting that we are looking back on this period, and Pran and Cannig are looking back further. I like the symmetry. Also, the description of hunting the animals to extinction demonstrates the lack of foresight of various races, and has extreme parallels with what we are doing these days. I do like the fact that a lot of Erikson's work has got enormous resonance when considering modern times, the careless manner in which we treat the other humans and animals who share our world. Hindsight is a terrible thing. Okay, fess up, who needed a dictionary to find out what crepuscular meant? Just me. Here again we have a conflict where we might have difficulty knowing what side to root for. The last time we saw Pran Chol, he was instrumental in the rebirth of Tattersail into Silverfox, and so I personally felt as though he was a decent chappie. Here he is pursuing a Jaghut mother and 2 exhausted children for less than happy purposes. Good or evil? Ah yes, I forgot Erikson doesn't play with white and black hats on his characters. A couple of comments. There is mention that the Imis and Jaghut are able, at times, to cooperate, such as over the chaining of Rarist. The Jaghut mother also believes the Imis care nothing for torture. Well, we've seen the Imis break every bone in the body of a Jaghut child and bury it under rock. Is that not torture? It's very odd, the sort of things in books that make you grimace. Here I'll say that the Jaghut children suckling the breasts of the Imis made me cringe a little, knowing at least a little of the history between the races. The rotted tooth of a ruined tower rose from the plain's edge. Now that doesn't sound like a pleasant place, does it? Rotted teeth are never fun. She could not recognize the warren. The old damage obscured the portal's characteristics. Who thinks that playing with unknown warrens is a seriously bad idea? When she suggests the elder warrens it might be, she doesn't think about Tista Andi or Tista Edda. Is this because those races have not yet arrived in the Malazan Empire, or because she's unaware, or what is the rent? What do the Imis know about it? Go to mourn, Bonecaster, the clan leader whispered. We are not cruel. This doesn't sound good for those poor Jaghut children. Ooh, now what has been released by the exchange of souls? What or who? Since we're currently back in the past, the soul could be anyone. It sounds like a big bad, the crippled god, the Tista Edda, someone we've met already, someone we're yet to meet. The creature must now free itself of its tomb, and that has been thoroughly warded. The Imis became the Talan Imis for the sake of their eternal war with the Jaghut. How unutterably sad and single-minded, and quite honestly, horrific. Bill, single-minded is rarely a good trait in the Erikson universe. Closing square bracket. The city was built by the K'chain Chemal, a name we have heard before, and never under positive circumstances. Now here is something that occurs to me with the second part of the prologue. Since I am aware that the crippled god is a big enough feature of the series to have the final novel named after him, I keep trying to spot the first arrival on the scene. But other than jade statues, I think this is the first occasion that we see any proper mention of the crippled god and the effect it has had on history. Bill Erikson is tricky. We get a throwaway references by the Talan Imis who board Solander in DG. One of them mistakenly refers to Culp as servant of the Chained One. But what a mention. The conflagration had seemed unending, world-devouring, weeks into months, and through it all could be heard the screams of a god. Ooh, was it just me thinking Star Wars at this line? Pain gave birth to rage. Rage to poison and infection sparing no one. It was a little Darth Vader. Elder gods. Elder warrens. A fallen god. Wow, the possibilities for harsh unpleasantries are many. The foreign god had been torn apart in his descent to Earth. The crippled god came from elsewhere. The same as the Tista races. Does he belong to them? Dear Lord, and the god was brought through to destroy someone else. Exclamation mark. Desperate enough to part the fabric of chaos to open a way into an alien remote realm, to then lure a curious god of that realm closer, ever closer to the trap they had prepared. The summoners sought power. All to destroy one man. Wait. Kala, we've heard that name, haven't we? Wasn't he connected to Brood in Got M? Bill, yep. Closing square bracket. And Draconis, he forged Dragnipur, right? Bill, yep again. Closing square bracket. These are some weighty names we're seeing right from the first page. Oh. And here we're seeing the creation of the warren used by the Imperial Army, all the death and destruction, all those bones and statues and the dust of ages, that is all Jakuroku, within the Imperial Warren. They merged their power to draw chains around a continent of slaughter, then pulled it into a warren created for that sole purpose, leaving the land itself bared. To heal. And considering what he has dealt upon the people he held tyrannical sway over, I think it is more than fitting punishment for Kala to always live and never ascend. Sister of Cold Knights, I don't recognize the name at all. Help. Will be interesting to revisit the prologue having read the entire novel. Bill's comments on the prologue. We've heard a lot about the Talan and Jaghut wars, or another perspective pogroms. And it was relatively early in GoTM that we had our first hint that the simplistic Imis good, Jaghut bad cause the tyrants wasn't going to be the whole story, as in this exchange between Lorne and Tool. Tool, they the Jaghut weren't very warlike, were they? I mean, before your kind sought to destroy them. Even then, he said at last. The key lay in making them angry. Then of course in DG we have the Jagheart ghost and his family, including the children whose bones were shattered and pinned under rocks, an image that can't help but raise the reader's sympathy. And Amanda, it does seem to call into question Pran's comments, though we're told they didn't have time. I think what we see in that is how the Talar Nimis have a ruthless pragmatism that can in fact substitute for cruelty, save in the eye of the ruthlessly pragmatic. And or possibly the idea that the Imis have degenerated in their view of cruelty, either accepting it or losing their awareness of it, the effect of an eternal war. Here we get to see the war in action. But first we open with another of those scene settings. The Jagheart sorcery is breaking and so the land is recovering from the glaciers, though memories of mountain high ice remain title flag. The freshwater sea that had formed with the breaking of the Jagheart sorcery is itself morphing as the land rises. And within the geological lies the biological. Literally in this case, as Pran Chol looks on the ancient scene frozen before him, a family of Rannig surrounded by the air hunters who fell victim to the same sinkhole as the Rannig. Another memory of ice. By the way, we've seen this before with the Semke god in DG and we'll see it again later. Okay, there's a lot to unpack here. Layers and changes, generational shifts, and remnants, scars, legacies of what came before. It's a theme we've already seen. Think the detritus of civilizations or the sea that lies below Raraku in DG, and which we'll see repeatedly throughout the series, all the way to TCG. The geological shift is mirrored by population shifts as well, ice to sea to newly birthed land, Jagheart to Imis to human. Although let's not assume it ends there. After all, it never has. Hunter and hunted, the scene is mirrored by the Talar Nimis and Jagheart frozen in endless war, hunter and hunted, both made victim, both sinking. Overhunting and ecological ripples, the recognition by Cannig that they have hunted the Tennig and Rannig to extinction, which in turn led to the starvation of the A and so on, certainly has echoes with our own experiences, as Amanda has pointed out. As well as other unintended ecological consequences of our actions. It's a reference to ecological short-sightedness that builds on Dyke's little mini-history in DG about the deforestation. All of this could have been too blunt a metaphor, so I like how Erickson filters it rather through the eyes of Pran Chol and Cannig Toll, allowing the characters to wrestle with the metaphor, so it becomes part of the story rather than a loud red flag waved from the author to the reader. Moving on, I like how Jagheart and Imis are further blurred by language when Pran Chol looks at his shadow, his darker self, and thinks it makes him look almost as tall as a Jagheart. Then again when he thinks how, when pursuing Jagheart, the distinction of hunter and hunted had little meaning. Crepuscular, love that word. And of course, it is the twilight of the Jagheart, and, in differing fashion, of the Imis. We find more reasons to sympathize with the Jagheart in the next scene. We have a mother's POV. It has to be a pretty bad mom, think closet hangers, for one to not sympathize with a mother's POV. It's a mother contemplating the death of her children and taking comfort in the fact that her hunters aren't cruel, but will kill quickly and cleanly. We find out that she had been allies with the Imis. She had turned against her own good old Rarist from GoTM. Her lack of bitterness at all that. Can any of us say we would reject bitterness in that situation? The idea that Jagheart mothers have always sought bargains to spare the lives of their children and that the Imis never agree to them. Try and picture that scene occurring time and time again and not feel sympathy. Note the detail regarding Kalava, her large swollen breasts indicating she had recently birthed. Perhaps the cracked earth, the wound, the birth of a molten river. Vast and black. Of stone and ash, the rotted tooth of a ruined tower, the red welt, and Kalava's unease are small clues that what seems like an act of compassion might not end well. Just saying. Or that sultry clouds of dust that hung motionless in her wake, though that line has depths of echoes to it, the dust that the Talar Nimis will be travel as when the ritual is performed as well as the idea of our actions haunting us riding in our wake always. Remember that physical description, mounds in circles, a larger one in the center, a ruined tower. Note the scent of one ancient and dead, the other. Less so is not so good, maybe. Her thoughts, the journey will not be long. Your mother waits beyond are indeed a lie, though the first as much as the second, though Kalava doesn't know it. And never ever ask what could be worse than death in a fantasy novel. Turns out lots of things can be, it also turns out, as we'll see in this book, that death might not be so bad. I like the irony of the conversation between Pran Chol and the Jagheart mother, how she says she always thought the Imis lacked such concepts as compassion and mercy, followed immediately by Pran Chol displaying both qualities by not telling her what is about to unfold with her children. And then shortly afterward, after killing the mother, Cannig told us the same, telling Pran to hurry to try and save the Jagheart children, save them by killing them cleanly and quickly as the Jagheart mother took former comfort in. Echoing Pran's interior thought with his own spoken one, we are not cruel. Mourn, is it mourn, as in mourning and thus rebirth, new life, new hope, or is that other kind of mourn, which is not so much. Funny to hear Pran Chol described as a young man, isn't it? And then we get the horror that will reverberate throughout this book and in ripples throughout the series. The rent is not Omtos Felic. It is a wound sealed by soul, a soul that suffers for all eternity. Unless it is replaced, as it just has been. And beyond the tragic horror of the children is the idea that something has been freed, something powerful enough to free itself of that massive tomb then through the stone itself. And yes, we will see just what that was. By the way, if you recall, we were set up for this sort of plot point in DG when Stormy, Gesler, etc. were on the Salander and a group of Talar Nimis appeared, one of them sacrificing himself, seemingly at least remember that Tista Andy had to seal a rent. We also find out the gathering is nigh, soon to be known as the First Gathering, implying when the Imis enact the ritual of Telen and become the Talar Nimis that we've seen in the prior two books. All for the sake of war. Kalava, however, tells us she will not partake of the ritual, which of course also begs the question of whether other Imis did the same. And now we get more connections to the prior books. We've seen Pran already in his withered form when he helps birth Silverfox, and we've met Rast of course when we learn that Kalava is the sister of Tul. We also learn why Tul is clanless, because his sister killed their clan. More details to follow. We've had Kchain Chemal mentioned before, remember the bone phone from GoTM here and there, but Pran Chol is right when he implies we're about to hear much more about that race. Much more. Speaking of things we'll hear more of. The crippled god. And what a scene we get of his fall. It's interesting to note that for all the ways we'll soon see the crippled god, he's introduced to us as being pulled down unwillingly and screaming for months, as being in pain. The word is used 3 times in this regard in close proximity, and grief. Though then his pain gave birth to rage. Rage to poison, poison being a word associated with him, and that will play a major role in War. We've seen Caryl before, of course, and his connection to blood. Remember he was reawakened when blood fell in the bell tower of his temple in Darichistan. And in this prologue we find out why he was asleep. It's a bit of a tease to tell us that those who summoned down the crippled god did so out of desperation to kill one man, what and who could have driven them to such straits. Here I picture Kala being said in the same way Seinfeld used to say Newman on that show. Yum, maggots. Crawling out of rotting, endlessly pulsing meat and broken bone. But soon transformed into great ravens, think crone from GoTM. File that fact away. Also the idea that the CG came down in pieces. Kala. Think of all the bad stuff we've been told about the Jagheart tyrants. So bad the Imis decided to make themselves immortal and kill all Jagheart to prevent them arising again. And now we're told Kala was worse. Fair warning then, don't be surprised by Kala's actions in this book. Which actions, of course, would be telling. Interesting too to note that Carol, as we see in present time, is intervening for good here. Ash. Ash and bone. Layers and heaps of it. Everything incinerated. Ring a bell, anyone? Later we'll be told Carol will create a new warren to hold this all so the land may heal. Earlier in DG, we had Kalam find a sign of Kala in the warren he traveled through, a warren we've had repeatedly described as filled with ash. How's this for an image? Upon a ragged hilltop where wind swirled through the ashes, spinning funeral wreaths skyward. Directly before them, on a heap of burnt bones, was a throne. The man seated upon it was smiling. Tell me that's not a portrait waiting to be painted. Or a movie scene waiting to be filmed. And now we get the big reveal of just how bad Kala is. Not only was he a tyrant of millions. He's the murderer of them. Also, they wouldn't be taken from him by these three elder gods, Carol, sister of Cold Knights, Nighthill, Silverfox, and Draconis. The old, if I can't have them, nobody can game. Wow. Then the formal exchange of curses, got to say, it does appear on the surface at least that Kala seems to get the best of these curses, though perhaps not from his POV. Kala gets unending life, though filled with mortal pain and age and despair, and all he touches or attempts will turn to dust. Meanwhile, Carol will fade away until a certain night in Darricheston. Draconis will have his creation turned against him, that special sword which we've already seen. Hint, Draconis is associated with darkness. And Sister of Cold Knights will be torn apart by demons outside Pale and then reborn into the body of Silverfox. Okay, Kala's curse was a tad less specific, but I'm pretty sure this is all pretty straightforward here. By the way, that curse on Kala gives us some insight into what we saw in Go TM. Kala said, I walked this land when the Talanimus were but children. I have commanded armies 100,000 strong. I have spread the fire of my wrath across entire continents, and sat alone upon tall thrones. Do you grasp the meaning of this? Yes, said Kaladin Brood, you never learn. We close nearly how we began, with an animal scene. In this case, an elder god, the elder gods are young to him, one-eyed, ring a bell. And searching for its mate. Much more to come from that angle. And that, my friends, is one hell of a packed prologue, setting in motion events and characters not only for Memories of Ice, but plot threads, characters, and themes that will ripple all the way through to the bitter end, raising their heads, literally or metaphorically, in the crippled god.